Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to the English Globe, where we explore important global issues in clear, slow, and friendly English, so that learners from every country can improve their listening skills, while also understanding how the world around them is changing in political, economic, and social ways that shape the daily lives of millions of people across continents and regions.
Today, we begin our journey into a topic that many people often hear in the news, but sometimes struggle to fully understand, because it involves history, power, alliances, responsibilities, and many complicated decisions. And that topic is the question of why America always seems to be involved in global conflicts and major international situations all around the world.
This is an important subject because the United States plays a large role in international politics, and when the U.S. takes action in different regions, those actions can influence economies, inspire diplomatic changes, affect security calculations, and sometimes shape how other countries respond to challenges. So understanding this topic helps English learners better follow the global news with confidence.
We also discuss this topic because many English learners want to understand not only vocabulary from the news, but also the meaning behind headlines. And by learning how countries interact with one another, you develop clearer thinking, stronger communication skills, and a deeper sense of how modern international relations work in a world that is constantly shifting.
In this episode, we will look at history, economic interests, military alliances, political values, humanitarian reasons, and new global challenges. And we will do this slowly and carefully, without taking sides, and without using language that is aggressive or harmful, so that the learning environment stays safe, educational, and appropriate for YouTube policies and international audiences.
Before we begin our full explanation, we kindly ask you, dear listeners, to support the English Globe by liking this video, because your likes help the channel grow and reach more learners around the world who want to improve their English through simple storytelling, clear explanations, and friendly conversations about global events.
We also invite you to subscribe to the channel if you are new, because subscribing allows you to stay connected to our weekly educational podcasts, and it helps us continue creating long, helpful lessons that make complicated topics easier to understand for learners at beginner and intermediate levels.
Please tell us in the comments where you are listening from, whether you are studying at home, traveling, working, or relaxing after a busy day, because we are always excited to see listeners joining us from different parts of the world, and your messages help us understand how to make future episodes even more useful for your English journey.
You can also share your honest opinions about today's topic because we want to know what you think about America's involvement in global affairs. And even if you are not familiar with politics, your perspective is welcome since this channel values open-minded discussion, respectful communication, and thoughtful engagement with important modern issues.
As we move deeper into the main subject, we encourage you to listen slowly, pause the video if needed, and focus on the rhythm of the sentences, because long-form listening practice is one of the most effective ways to improve your English comprehension, especially when the topic is presented step by step in a clear and gentle manner.
Understanding why America is involved in so many conflicts is not only about politics, but also about the world's geography, economic networks, global security challenges, and the responsibilities that powerful countries often take on. So learning this makes you more informed, more confident, and more capable of following international conversations.
As we continue, remember that we are here to guide you with patience and clarity, and the goal of this long podcast is to help you practice listening, learn new vocabulary, explore global topics, and build a stronger connection to the English language through real-world subjects that matter to millions of people today.
So get comfortable, stay focused, and enjoy this deep exploration of global affairs, because understanding the reasons behind America's worldwide involvement will give you a clearer view of how countries make decisions, how history shapes the present, and how international cooperation and conflict influence the future of global security and stability.
With that warm introduction complete, let us prepare to explore the historical background of America's global role, which will help you understand how the United States became such a central player in world politics and why its actions continue to attract so much attention from governments, analysts, and everyday people around the world.
When we look back at history to understand how the United States became such an important global power, we need to start with the years around World War II. Because before that period, America was strong, but not deeply involved in many international conflicts, and people in the United States often preferred to focus on their own country rather than participate heavily in foreign affairs, which makes this change one of the most important turning points in modern international relations.
After World War II ended in 1945, the situation of the world was completely different from what it had been before, because many powerful countries in Europe and Asia were weakened by years of fighting, their economies were damaged, their cities were destroyed, and they needed help to rebuild. So the United States stepped into a new leadership role to support recovery and stability, which is an important vocabulary word meaning the condition of being steady and safe.
At the same time, the United States had become one of the strongest economies in the world, and it had developed powerful military technology during the war, which gave it the ability to influence global events more than ever before. And because many countries depended on American support for rebuilding and protection, the U.S. began forming alliances, which is a key word meaning agreements between countries that promise cooperation and security.
One of the biggest reasons for these alliances was the start of the Cold War, which was a long period of tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, two powerful countries that had different political systems and different goals for how the world should be organized. And even though they did not fight directly in a major war, their competition shaped almost every part of global foreign policy for more than 40 years.
During the Cold War, the United States believed it needed to work closely with other countries to stop the spread of political systems that were different from its own. And this idea influenced American decisions in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, and Africa, because leaders in Washington felt that protecting their allies also protected their own national security, which is another important term meaning the safety of a country from threats.
One of the most famous alliances created during this period was NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which brought together the United States and several European countries to promise mutual defense, meaning that if one member was attacked, the others would help. And this agreement became a central part of American foreign policy, shaping how the US responded to global events and how it balanced its relationships with emerging powers in the decades that followed.
In addition to military partnerships, the United States also played a major role in building international economic institutions, such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, because American leaders believed that helping countries rebuild their economies would prevent future conflicts, protect global trade routes, create stronger markets, and reduce the risk of instability, which is another key word meaning uncertainty or unpredictable conditions.
The United States also used cultural influence during this period because American movies, music, fashion, technology, and consumer brands spread around the world, shaping global culture in ways that made the US more visible and more influential. And this soft power, which refers to influence through culture rather than military force, helped the United States build strong diplomatic relationships and improve cooperation with different regions.
When the Cold War ended in the early 1990s, many people wondered what the world would look like without the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. And because the U.S. remained the strongest economy and military power, it began to take on new responsibilities, responding to regional conflicts, participating in peacekeeping missions, and working with international organizations to address new challenges that were emerging as globalization grew stronger.
As the world entered the 21st century, the United States continued to be deeply involved in global affairs because new issues such as terrorism, cyber threats, and competition from rising powers required cooperation between many countries, and American leaders believed that the US needed to maintain a strong international presence to support international stability, protect trade, and reduce risks that could affect both Americans and their partners around the world.
This historical journey shows why the United States is not only involved in conflicts, but also connected to many systems that support global politics, economics, and security. And understanding this background helps English learners make sense of today's news, because it explains why American decisions often have effects that reach far beyond its borders and shape the choices of governments in many different regions.
By learning key vocabulary such as alliance, stability, national security, soft power, and foreign policy, you build the foundation needed to understand modern international relations. And as we continue through the next sections of this podcast, we will explore how economic interests, military commitments, political values, and humanitarian responsibilities all add layers to the story of why the United States remains deeply connected to global events today.
When we talk about why the United States becomes involved in different regions around the world, one of the biggest reasons is its deep connection to global trade, because the American economy depends on goods, resources, technologies, and financial systems that move across international borders every single day. And when these systems face risks or disruptions, American leaders often believe they must take action to protect the stability that supports both their own economy and the worldwide economy.
To understand this clearly, learners should first remember that global trade routes, which include shipping lanes, air corridors, energy pipelines, and digital networks, act like the bloodstream of the world economy, and when any major route is blocked or threatened by political tension, natural disasters, piracy, or regional instability, it can cause huge delays, higher costs, or shortages, so the United States monitors these routes closely to help maintain a predictable flow of goods.
One example often discussed by experts is the importance of sea routes such as the South China Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, and the Panama Canal, because these narrow passages are used by ships carrying energy resources, manufactured products, and essential materials. And since a large part of America's economy relies on imported items and exported goods, the U.S. pays attention to events in these regions to prevent disruptions that could affect businesses, workers, and consumers around the world.
Energy supplies are another major factor because even though the United States produces a large amount of its own oil and gas, it still participates in global energy markets, meaning that changes in price, production levels, transportation routes, or political tensions can affect not only Americans, but also millions of people in other countries. So American involvement often focuses on keeping energy markets stable in order to avoid sudden shocks that could harm the global economy.
For example, when energy prices rise too quickly due to conflict in key regions, transportation becomes more expensive, factories reduce production, food prices increase, and families everywhere feel pressure, which is why American policymakers work with partners, international organizations, and regional governments to support stability, encourage diplomatic solutions, and reduce risks that could lead to economic challenges for countries that depend on imported energy.
Another important part of America's economic involvement is protecting global supply chains, which are long networks of production that move materials from one country to another before a final product is created, and because modern industries rely on components from many different places, even a small disruption can slow down production for electronics, medical equipment, automobiles, and other essential goods, making the United States more active in areas where these supply chains face uncertainty.
Technology is a major example of this, because much of the world's semiconductor production, meaning the chips used in phones, computers, vehicles, and communication systems, comes from only a few regions, which creates concerns about what might happen if political tensions or natural disasters interrupt production. So the United States works to strengthen partnerships, diversify supply chains, and maintain secure trade relationships to protect industries that depend on advanced technology.
In addition to technology, agricultural trade is another critical area, because the United States is both a major exporter of food and a major importer of items such as fruits, vegetables, and raw materials from many countries. And when global weather events, transportation delays, or regional disputes threaten the movement of these goods, American officials coordinate with international partners to support cooperation that keeps food markets stable and prevents shortages that might affect everyday consumers.
Global financial stability also plays a large role in U.S. involvement, because the American dollar is widely used in international trade, investment, and banking. And when countries face economic crises, currency problems, or debt challenges, the effects often spread far beyond their borders. So the United States works with global financial institutions to support stability, encourage responsible policies, and protect the worldwide financial system from sudden disruptions.
To understand this better, learners can imagine the world economy like a large network where every node affects another, meaning that when one region experiences economic trouble, trade slows down, investment decreases, and uncertainty spreads. And because the United States is deeply integrated into this network, American leaders believe that helping maintain global economic stability also protects American workers, businesses, and long-term national interests.
Another key idea is market access, which refers to the ability of American companies to sell products in other countries. And because the U.S. exports everything from airplanes and machinery to medical devices and entertainment services, its involvement in international agreements, regional partnerships, and global negotiations aims to ensure fair competition and open markets that benefit both American industries and the countries they trade with.
However, it is important to understand that these actions are not only about economic benefits, but also about cooperation. Because many countries depend on shared trade agreements, joint investments, and regional partnerships that keep their economies stable. And the United States participates in these systems to support predictable rules, peaceful relationships, and long-term economic growth for countries that value secure and open global markets.
When learners think about why America is active in global economic issues, they should remember that modern trade connects almost every country, industry, and household. And because the U.S. economy is large and interconnected, American leaders believe that involvement in different regions helps protect the systems that support jobs, technology, energy, and essential goods for people around the world.
As we move forward in this podcast, this understanding of economic interests will help explain many of the decisions the United States makes internationally, because economics, security, diplomacy, and global stability are all linked together, shaping America's role in the world and influencing how other countries respond to the challenges and opportunities of an increasingly connected global economy.
When we explore why the United States is involved in so many global security issues, one of the most important reasons is the network of military alliances it has built over many decades, because these partnerships connect countries across Europe, Asia, and other regions, and they create agreements that promise cooperation, shared defense, and mutual support when security challenges arise, which means the United States responds not only to its own interests, but also to the responsibilities it has agreed to with its allies.
One of the most well-known alliances in the world is NATO, which stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And it was created in 1949 after World War II, when many countries in Europe felt vulnerable and wanted to work together to protect their security. So the United States joined them in a collective defense agreement, meaning that if one member is attacked, all other members must help, turning the alliance into a powerful symbol of unity and shared responsibility.
To help English learners understand this clearly, the key word collective defense means that a group of nations acts like a team, promising that a threat against one member is treated as a threat against all. And because the United States is one of the strongest members of NATO, American involvement often becomes central whenever security discussions take place, especially when tensions rise in regions connected to Europe or areas that affect NATO members directly or indirectly.
This alliance system means that American foreign policy is not only shaped by its own decisions, but also by the needs and safety concerns of its partners. Because NATO members expect each other to communicate, coordinate, and cooperate when facing risks such as cyber attacks, territorial disputes, or political pressure. And this cooperation requires constant planning, military exercises, intelligence sharing, and diplomatic communication to keep the alliance strong and effective.
Beyond NATO, the United States also has defense partnerships with countries in Asia, such as Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines, and these agreements are based on long-term cooperation, shared strategic goals, and commitments to stability in regions that are important for trade, security, and international balance. So when regional tensions rise, American involvement is often part of a broader effort to maintain peace, deter conflict, and reassure allies who rely on U.S. support.
In Asia, for example, the security environment includes concerns about territorial disputes, military expansion, and the protection of important sea routes. And because many countries depend on open navigation for their economies, the United States works with its partners to monitor the region, conduct joint exercises, and maintain a presence that supports regional stability, which is a vocabulary term meaning peaceful, predictable, and cooperative conditions.
Another important part of American security commitments is the concept of deterrence, which means trying to prevent conflict before it happens by showing that any attack on allies would be met with a strong and unified response, and this strategy is used to discourage potential aggressors from taking actions that could harm regional peace. So U.S. involvement often reflects a desire to protect stability rather than start new conflicts.
The United States also participates in international peacekeeping missions and security operations with partners in the Middle East, Africa, and other regions, focusing on countering terrorism, supporting friendly governments, and helping maintain safe conditions for civilians. And these missions often involve cooperation with local forces, international organizations, and regional alliances that share the goal of reducing violence and promoting long-term development.
These security commitments sometimes lead to complex decisions, because being part of alliances means the United States cannot simply ignore global events that affect its partners, and leadership responsibilities often require American involvement in diplomatic negotiations, military planning, and crisis management to uphold the promises it made to allies who depend on American support to maintain their own security and independence.
For English learners, it is important to understand that alliances are not only military tools, but also political agreements that build trust between countries, encourage cooperation, and reduce the chances of misunderstandings. Because when nations communicate regularly, share information, and align their strategies, they create a strong foundation for peace and mutual understanding, which helps prevent conflicts from escalating.
Another key idea is interoperability, which means that the military forces of allied countries train together, share equipment standards, and develop systems that work smoothly when combined. And this level of cooperation makes it easier for countries to respond quickly to emergencies, natural disasters, or security threats, allowing them to act as a coordinated group rather than as isolated nations facing challenges alone.
Because alliances require active participation, the United States remains involved in global security issues not only to protect its own territory, but also to uphold commitments that were made to other nations. And this sense of responsibility shapes how the US acts during international tensions, how it supports peacekeeping operations, and how it helps countries threatened by instability, all while working within the rules and agreements that define modern international cooperation.
For this reason, when people ask why America is engaged in certain conflicts or regional challenges, one part of the answer is that alliances come with obligations. And by fulfilling those obligations, the United States helps maintain a global system where countries work together to prevent violence, encourage diplomacy, and support peaceful solutions whenever possible, creating an environment that benefits many nations, not just one.
Understanding these military alliances and security commitments helps learners see that America's global involvement is not only the result of power, but also the result of long-term agreements, shared interests, and collective goals. And in the next part of our podcast, we will explore how political influence and the promotion of certain values also affect the choices the United States makes in its foreign policy and its relationships around the world.
When we look at another major reason why the United States becomes involved in global issues, we must explore the idea of political influence and the long-standing American interest in supporting democratic systems around the world. Because U.S. leaders often believe that when more countries adopt stable political institutions, peaceful elections, independent courts, and open societies, the international environment becomes safer, more predictable, and more cooperative for everyone involved.
To explain this clearly for English learners, democracy promotion means encouraging political systems where people vote for their leaders, where governments follow laws, and where citizens have basic freedoms, and the United States has supported these ideas for many decades through diplomacy, educational programs, economic partnerships, and international development projects that aim to strengthen institutions such as parliaments, justice systems, and local governments in countries that request external cooperation.
The United States believes that when democratic institutions are strong, they help reduce corruption, protect human rights, and provide peaceful ways to solve disagreements. And because these values align with American political principles, U.S. leaders often form close partnerships with countries that share similar systems, creating long-term diplomatic relationships that encourage cooperation in trade, security, science, and cultural exchange, making democracy an important part of America's global identity.
Another important aspect of political influence is the American role in international organizations, because global institutions such as the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Health Organization, and regional groups give countries a platform to coordinate on global challenges, negotiate agreements, discuss security concerns, and create rules that guide international behavior. And the United States takes an active role in many of these institutions to shape peaceful outcomes.
By maintaining leadership positions in these organizations, the United States participates in setting standards for development, humanitarian assistance, environmental cooperation, public health, and international law, and this involvement allows the U.S. to support partners, respond to crises, promote conflict resolution, and encourage peaceful negotiations, which helps create a stable global landscape where countries can work together even when they face political or economic differences.
For English learners, it is useful to understand the word influence, which in this context means the ability to shape decisions, guide discussions, and encourage positive outcomes without using force. And the United States often uses diplomatic influence by providing technical assistance, supporting international observers during elections, sponsoring peace dialogues, and helping countries build stronger administrative systems that serve their citizens more effectively.
The U.S. also maintains political influence by supporting regional partners through dialogue, economic development programs, and multilateral cooperation, meaning actions taken with several countries at the same time, and this approach helps strengthen networks of allies who share similar goals related to economic growth, peaceful dispute resolution, and social development, which in turn reinforces America's role in shaping global policies that affect multiple regions.
In many cases, the United States works with partners not to control their systems, but to provide support when requested, such as offering election training, legal guidance, or diplomatic assistance, and these cooperative efforts aim to help countries develop stronger governance structures, which is a key vocabulary term, meaning the institutions and processes that guide how governments make decisions, deliver services, and maintain fairness for their citizens.
Political influence also connects to America's long-term foreign policy goals, because the U.S. believes that countries with stable governments, transparent institutions, and constructive political processes are less likely to fall into conflict, and when regions remain peaceful, global trade stays steady, security threats decrease, and international cooperation becomes easier, making political stability a shared interest among many countries, not just a priority for the United States alone.
Another way the United States maintains political influence is through public diplomacy, which means communicating with people in other countries through cultural programs, academic exchanges, media partnerships, and language training initiatives that help build mutual understanding, encourage dialogue, and reduce stereotypes, allowing citizens and leaders to develop stronger connections that support long-term peace and cooperation between nations.
It is important to explain that promoting certain values does not mean forcing countries to adopt identical systems, but instead encouraging peaceful processes that allow citizens to choose their own path. And this approach is based on the belief that open political participation helps reduce instability, improves accountability, and builds trust between governments and the people they serve, which ultimately supports global harmony and cooperation.
Political influence also involves working with different global groups on issues such as climate policy, economic development, and humanitarian assistance. And because these issues affect many countries at the same time, US participation helps coordinate solutions, share technology, and support vulnerable regions, demonstrating how political leadership can contribute to global progress without relying solely on military or economic tools.
For this reason, when examining why the United States remains involved in many regions, it is essential to recognize that political influence allows America to help maintain international systems that support peaceful cooperation, fair decision-making, and long-term stability, which benefits not only American interests but also the global community, especially in moments when diplomacy prevents misunderstandings from turning into larger conflicts.
By understanding America's role in promoting democracy, supporting partners, and engaging in international organizations, English learners gain a clearer picture of how political values shape foreign policy decisions. And in the following section of our podcast, we will explore how humanitarian goals, human rights concerns, and global development efforts also influence the choices American leaders make when responding to international challenges.
In this part of our discussion, we want to help our listeners understand why the United States pays so much attention to global security challenges. And we also want to explain these ideas in slow, clear, and simple English so that even beginner students can follow the meaning without feeling lost. Because topics like terrorism, cybersecurity, and rival powers can sound very complicated, but when we break them into easy sentences, you will see that these issues are connected to safety, stability, and peace in different parts of the world, and they help explain why the U.S. becomes involved in international events that may seem far away from ordinary American people.
When we start with the idea of terrorism, we are talking about violent groups that use fear, attacks, or threats to get attention or to push their political goals. And for many years, the United States has watched these groups closely because they can create instability in regions. They can affect allies, and sometimes they can even target Americans. So the US believes it must cooperate with partners, share intelligence, and support countries that are trying to limit the power of these dangerous organizations. And this long-term effort is one of the main reasons why America stays active in global security issues.
Another major challenge that has grown very quickly in the modern world is cybersecurity, and this word simply refers to protecting computers, networks, and information systems from attacks, because today almost everything, banks, hospitals, airports, power stations, and even governments, depends on digital technology, and when these systems are attacked by hackers or foreign groups, it can cause serious problems such as stolen information, damaged infrastructure, or even threats to national security. So the U.S. government invests a huge amount of time and resources to defend against these digital dangers, and it cooperates with many countries to improve global cyber safety.
Cyber attacks are very different from traditional wars because enemies do not need to cross borders with soldiers or weapons. Instead, they can sit behind computers anywhere in the world and still cause disruption. And this makes cybersecurity a top priority for many governments, especially the United States, which manages one of the largest digital networks on the planet. And because everything from communication to transportation depends on these systems, the US must always stay alert, monitor suspicious activity, and prepare quick responses to protect itself and its partners from these invisible online threats.
Now, when we talk about rival powers, we mean large countries that compete with the United States for influence, resources, or leadership in the world. And this competition can appear in many forms, such as military strength, economic growth, technology development, or even diplomacy. And the US must pay attention to these countries because their actions can change the balance of power, affect international trade, or impact regional security. So this competition is not always direct fighting or conflict. It is often a strategic contest that lasts many years, and it shapes how the US builds alliances, where it places military bases, and how it uses diplomacy to protect its interests.
A rival power may build strong relationships with other countries, expand its military capabilities, or try to influence global organizations. And when this happens, the United States studies these movements carefully and decides what kind of response is needed to protect its own national goals. And this can include strengthening existing alliances, creating new partnerships, increasing its presence in important regions, or supporting friendly countries that feel pressure from bigger neighbors. And although these decisions can sometimes create tension, they are often made to prevent conflict, promote stability, and ensure that no single power becomes too dominant.
When we combine all these challenges, terrorism, cybersecurity risks, and competition with rival powers, we can see why the world has become more complex and why global events can affect the United States even when they happen far away. And this is why American leaders often say that security today is global, not just local, because digital threats travel across borders instantly. Violent groups can operate in multiple countries, and major powers compete for influence on almost every continent. So the US believes it must stay involved, stay informed, and work with like-minded nations to maintain safety and protect international stability.
And for English learners, understanding these ideas helps you understand news stories in a deeper way, because you start recognizing why countries cooperate, why they make security decisions, and how global events connect with each other. And you also learn new vocabulary such as terrorism, cybersecurity, rival powers, stability, intelligence sharing, and international cooperation, all of which are important words used in conversations about world politics. And as we continue our podcast, we will keep using beginner-friendly explanations so that students everywhere can learn English through real global issues in a simple and comfortable way.
When we talk about humanitarian reasons, we mean actions taken to help people who are suffering from natural disasters, food shortages, disease outbreaks, or other crises, and the United States often becomes involved in these situations because it has strong resources, fast transportation, advanced medical teams, and international partnerships that allow it to bring help quickly. So this type of involvement is not about politics or conflict, but about reducing human pain, saving lives, and supporting global stability during difficult moments.
Many countries look to the United States for assistance during emergencies because American agencies and volunteers have experience in organizing large-scale humanitarian missions. And when floods, earthquakes, or severe storms hit a region, the US may send supplies such as food, water, medicine, or temporary shelters. And it may also work with international organizations to coordinate rescue teams, repair damaged systems, and help communities return to normal daily life as fast as possible, which shows how humanitarian involvement can play an important role in global cooperation.
Humanitarian work is also connected to peacekeeping, which means helping countries avoid conflict, rebuild after violence, or maintain order during sensitive transitions, and the United States often participates in peacekeeping through partnerships with global groups that aim to prevent the spread of instability, because when a region becomes unstable, it can affect nearby countries, create refugee movements, or disrupt economic activity, so supporting peacekeeping operations helps protect people and promotes long-term stability, which is an important goal for many nations, including the U.S.
When a country experiences political tension, the US sometimes supports diplomatic talks, election monitoring, or community-building programs that encourage dialogue and reduce misunderstandings. And these peaceful approaches are designed to build trust between groups and prevent small disagreements from turning into bigger problems, and by helping local institutions improve communication and cooperation. The US hopes to strengthen the foundations of stability, because peaceful solutions create safer environments for families, businesses, and future generations.
Peacekeeping efforts can include training local security forces in non-violent methods, teaching disaster response skills, or supporting organizations that work to protect children, women, and vulnerable populations. And these actions are meant to create safer communities where people can grow, learn, and work without fear. And the United States believes that supporting these kinds of efforts reduces the chance of instability spreading to other regions, which is why it often cooperates with trusted international partners to create long-term programs rather than short-term reactions.
Another important part of humanitarian involvement is supporting global health, which means helping countries prepare for medical emergencies, improve public health systems, and share scientific information during outbreaks. Because when diseases spread, they do not stop at borders, and protecting one region helps protect the entire international community. So the United States works with health organizations, research teams, and local governments to build strong health systems that can save lives and prevent future crises from growing into international emergencies.
Humanitarian assistance also includes helping countries recover from economic difficulties caused by disasters, because when people lose their homes, their farms, their jobs, or their businesses, recovery requires more than emergency supplies. It also requires long-term support for rebuilding schools, restoring transportation systems, improving clean water access, and encouraging businesses to reopen. And the U.S. sometimes provides financial help, training programs, or cooperation projects that allow affected communities to heal, rebuild, and stand on their own again.
For English learners, understanding these humanitarian and peacekeeping actions shows that international involvement is not always about competition or conflict, but often about compassion, cooperation, and shared responsibility, because countries depend on one another for safety, economic stability, and public health. And the United States plays a significant role in these global efforts because it has experience, resources, and partnerships that allow it to assist quickly and effectively, making the world a little safer and a little more stable when challenges arise.
And when we look at humanitarian work from a global perspective, we see that helping one area can prevent larger problems in the future, because disaster relief reduces suffering, peacekeeping reduces tension, and health cooperation reduces risk. So the United States views humanitarian involvement as a long-term investment in global stability and human well-being, and these efforts often create friendships, trust, and positive relationships between nations, which help build a more peaceful international environment over time. When we talk about criticisms and different views of U.S. involvement around the world, it is important to explain everything in simple, balanced, and respectful English, because people in different countries have different experiences, and these experiences shape their opinions. So some people believe American involvement brings stability, protection, and support to regions that face difficulty, while others believe that the United States sometimes becomes involved too quickly or too often, and understanding these different viewpoints helps English learners think critically about world issues without choosing sides or promoting negativity.
There are individuals who support U.S. involvement because they feel that America's economic strength, advanced technology, and strong partnerships allow it to respond to crises faster than many other countries. And they argue that when the US sends humanitarian aid, supports disaster relief, works with peacekeeping missions, or protects international trade routes, it helps prevent larger global problems, and these supporters believe that the world benefits when powerful nations take responsibility and assist countries that face challenges they cannot manage alone.
At the same time, there are people who express concerns about U.S. involvement because they feel that international actions should always be guided by local communities and regional organizations. And these individuals believe that some countries prefer to manage their own affairs without outside influence. So they argue that America should focus more on cooperation and listening rather than leading too strongly. And this perspective highlights the importance of respecting cultural differences, national independence, and the unique needs of each region.
Another viewpoint suggests that US involvement is sometimes driven by national interests, such as protecting trade routes or supporting allies. And people with this perspective do not say that these actions are wrong, but they want greater transparency about why decisions are made, and they believe that clear explanations help the global public understand long-term strategies. Because when actions are explained openly, it builds trust, improves communication, and reduces misunderstandings that can appear between countries with different political systems or historical experiences.
There are also discussions among scholars and analysts who study international relations, and these experts often explain that the world today is deeply connected through economics, technology, and communication, so it is natural for powerful countries like the United States to take an active role in global events, and they argue that when major nations work together to solve problems, it benefits the entire international community, especially during crises that no single country can handle alone, such as large natural disasters, cybersecurity threats, or regional instability.
However, other experts say that international organizations should sometimes take the lead instead of individual countries, because organizations like the United Nations or regional alliances represent many voices and can make decisions that reflect shared interests. And these critics believe that when decisions are made collectively, it reduces the pressure on any one nation to take responsibility. And it also encourages cooperation, fairness, and long-term stability across different regions with different political systems and social needs.
Some people in the United States also have their own internal debates about international involvement, because running disaster relief missions, supporting peacekeeping operations, or maintaining military partnerships requires money, time, and human resources. And these citizens believe that their government should carefully balance domestic priorities with international responsibilities. So they support involvement when it helps global stability, but want to ensure that local needs at home are also protected, showing how discussions about foreign policy exist both inside and outside the country.
At the same time, many Americans feel proud when their country helps others, because they see humanitarian aid, medical support, and diplomatic cooperation as examples of moral leadership. And they believe that sharing resources, preventing crises, and supporting peaceful solutions strengthens global cooperation, improves international relationships, and creates goodwill that can last for many years. So for these supporters, involvement is not just a political action, but also an expression of kindness, responsibility, and shared human values.
When English learners study these different perspectives, they gain a deeper understanding of how complex global issues can be, because there is rarely one simple explanation for international involvement, and people's opinions are shaped by history, culture, geography, and personal experience. So by listening to balanced discussions like this one, learners can practice forming their own ideas, asking thoughtful questions, and analyzing world events in a calm, respectful, and open-minded way, which is an important skill for anyone who wants to understand international news.
The most important point is that discussing different views does not mean choosing who is right or wrong. Instead, it means learning how to listen, how to compare information, and how to understand why people see the world differently. And this skill helps English learners communicate with confidence, think clearly about global events, and appreciate the diversity of opinions that exist in our international community, because respectful understanding is at the heart of good communication and peaceful global relationships.
In today's world, global events are changing very quickly, and understanding these changes helps explain why the United States makes certain decisions about foreign policy and international involvement, because new powers are rising economically, politically, and militarily. Technologies are evolving faster than ever, trade relationships are shifting, and regional conflicts are emerging in new ways, which together create a complex global environment where the U.S. must adapt its strategies to protect stability, maintain partnerships, and respond effectively to challenges that did not exist decades ago.
One major change in global power is the rise of countries like China, India, and other emerging economies that are growing their influence in trade, technology, and diplomacy. And because these nations are becoming more prominent in international decision-making, the United States often needs to balance cooperation with competition, working together on issues like climate change or public health, while also preparing for economic and strategic rivalries. And this balance is one of the reasons why America's foreign policy today is more flexible and multidimensional than in the past.
Economic tensions also play a key role in shaping global choices, because the modern economy is highly interconnected, meaning that decisions in one region can affect markets around the world almost instantly. And when countries compete for resources, control trade routes, or seek to protect their industries, the United States monitors these developments carefully, negotiates trade agreements, and sometimes intervenes diplomatically or economically to ensure that global commerce continues smoothly and that both allies and the international system remain stable.
New technologies are another major factor because advanced digital tools, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity innovations, space exploration capabilities, and modern military technologies are changing how countries interact and how conflicts may occur. And the United States invests heavily in developing and protecting these technologies while working with partners to establish rules, share knowledge safely, and prevent misunderstandings that could escalate into disputes. Because controlling or protecting technological assets often determines economic growth, security, and global influence in the 21st century.
In addition to rising powers and technology, new types of conflicts are appearing, such as cyber attacks, economic competition, regional disputes, and irregular threats from non-state actors. And these challenges require the United States to respond differently than in the past, because traditional military responses alone are not always sufficient. So leaders rely on diplomacy, intelligence sharing, multinational coordination, and technological solutions to prevent crises from spreading and to maintain peace and predictability in regions where instability could have global consequences.
Another important aspect is how shifting alliances influence global decisions, because some countries are strengthening partnerships with emerging powers, while others continue long-standing relationships with the United States and NATO members. And this changing network of alliances means that America must constantly analyze international developments, understand the priorities of different governments, and find ways to cooperate with allies while managing competition, which requires careful planning, negotiation skills, and constant awareness of global trends.
For example, as global supply chains become more complex, the U.S. must consider economic security as part of its international strategy, because disruptions in trade, transportation, or energy can have ripple effects across continents, and decisions about where to invest, where to form partnerships, or how to respond to tensions are often influenced by these economic factors, demonstrating that foreign policy is not only about politics or military strength, but also about supporting global stability, economic growth, and the predictable movement of goods and services around the world.
At the same time, environmental challenges such as climate change, resource scarcity, and natural disasters are becoming more central to global strategy, because countries must cooperate to address rising sea levels, extreme weather, and energy transitions. And the United States often participates in international agreements, provides technological support, and encourages collaborative solutions, which shows that modern conflicts and global competition are not only about power or resources, but also about shared challenges that require global coordination and long-term planning for the benefit of all nations.
When English learners consider these global changes, it is helpful to understand that rising powers, new technologies, economic tensions, and emerging conflicts create a world where no single country can manage problems alone, and this is why the United States works with allies, invests in innovation, participates in global forums, and carefully monitors international developments, because cooperation, preparedness, and adaptability are the keys to maintaining influence, supporting partners, and responding effectively to challenges in a complex and rapidly changing global environment.
Finally, thinking about the world today from this perspective shows that America's involvement is influenced not only by its own interests, but also by the need to maintain a stable international system where trade, communication, safety, and cooperation can continue. And by studying these trends, English learners gain insight into how global dynamics shape decisions, why partnerships and alliances matter, and how leaders balance competition and collaboration to create a safer, more connected, and more predictable world for the future.
As we reach the final part of our podcast, it is important to take a moment to review and summarize everything we have discussed today, because reflecting on the main ideas helps English learners remember new vocabulary, understand global issues more clearly, and connect world events with language practice. And in this episode, we explored why the United States is involved in global conflicts, including historical background, economic interests, military alliances, political influence, humanitarian missions, and modern security challenges. And by reviewing these topics step by step, learners can strengthen both their English skills and their understanding of international relations.
During our discussion, we introduced important vocabulary words that are useful for talking about global events, such as alliances, collective defense, democracy promotion, humanitarian assistance, cybersecurity, rival powers, peacekeeping, stability, diplomacy, and international cooperation. And by practicing these words in sentences and understanding their context, learners can improve listening comprehension, speaking fluency, and overall confidence in English, because using real examples from current global situations makes learning more meaningful and easier to remember.
We also reflected on the historical perspective, showing how the United States became a global power after World War II, participated in alliances like NATO, promoted political systems, and engaged in international organizations. And understanding these steps helps learners see that America's involvement in global events is not random, but the result of decades of planning, agreements, and cooperative efforts. And this historical awareness is helpful not only for learning English, but also for developing critical thinking about international relations, global trends, and long-term consequences.
Another key point we discussed is the role of economic interests, global trade, and technological advancement, because trade routes, resources, and innovation influence how countries interact and make decisions, and the United States often balances economic priorities with diplomatic efforts, security commitments, and humanitarian goals. And by observing these connections, learners can expand their vocabulary with terms like economic tension, global stability, technology, trade routes, and strategic partnership, which are useful for reading news, understanding discussions, and engaging in international conversations.
Humanitarian missions and peacekeeping efforts were also important topics, and they show how America supports people and communities during disasters, conflicts, or health crises, and these actions help maintain international stability while providing real-world examples of cooperation, empathy, and problem-solving. And English learners can benefit from understanding terms like disaster relief, emergency response, peacekeeping operations, and international collaboration, because these phrases appear frequently in news reports, educational materials, and conversations about global issues.
We also explored modern security challenges such as terrorism, cyber threats, and rival powers. And we explained why the US responds to these issues worldwide, often using diplomacy, alliances, and technological resources. And by learning about these topics, students can connect English vocabulary with current events, which improves comprehension, critical thinking, and discussion skills. And they can practice phrases like security challenges, digital threats, strategic response, and regional stability, all of which are essential for understanding international news and global developments.
In addition, we reflected on different viewpoints, showing that people have supportive and critical perspectives about U.S. involvement, and understanding these balanced opinions teaches learners to think critically, respect diverse ideas, and communicate more effectively in English, and discussing terms like criticism, supportive views, neutral perspective, and global awareness helps students practice expressing opinions clearly, describing situations objectively, and analyzing complex information in a way that is both educational and professional.
We also highlighted how rising powers, new technologies, and evolving global conflicts influence America's decisions today. And learners can see that international relations are dynamic and interconnected. And phrases such as emerging economies, global influence, economic competition, technological development, and geopolitical strategy are key for understanding modern world events. And practicing these terms helps English learners talk confidently about international issues, compare different countries, and describe changes in the world using accurate vocabulary and clear sentences.
Finally, the most important lesson from this episode is that learning English through real-world topics like global affairs, security, diplomacy, and humanitarian work not only strengthens language skills, but also improves world awareness, encourages curiosity, and helps students develop the ability to think critically about complex issues. And by practicing listening, repeating new words, and discussing ideas with friends or classmates, learners can make steady progress and feel confident using English in educational, professional, and social settings.
We encourage all listeners to continue exploring global news, international organizations, and real-world issues while practicing English daily, because combining language learning with understanding the world helps learners remember new vocabulary, improve listening comprehension, and communicate clearly in professional and social contexts. And by reflecting on these topics, students can develop the habit of connecting English with practical knowledge, which makes learning enjoyable, meaningful, and empowering for everyone interested in growing their language skills.
Before we close, we want to remind listeners that every step of learning is valuable, and even small efforts like practicing new words, summarizing ideas, or discussing current events can make a big difference over time. And using English to understand global affairs is a powerful way to combine language learning with knowledge about the world, because it improves both communication skills and awareness of international trends, alliances, and cooperation, which are essential for anyone interested in becoming a confident, informed, and thoughtful English speaker.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode on why the United States is involved in global conflicts. And we hope that this discussion has helped you learn new English vocabulary, understand complex topics in a simple way, and feel motivated to continue practicing your language skills while thinking about the world around you. And we appreciate your time, attention, and curiosity. And we look forward to sharing more educational content with you in future episodes in a professional, respectful, and beginner-friendly format.